Hello, class. This is a meeting about God's essence. Before this, we were studying the existence of God, if we could prove the existence of God. Today, we are going to try to find out if we can know something about God. I mean, how He is, what He is, and what things He can do. So, that is this lesson about the essence of God. We shall go through the different religions and we shall begin with Hinduism. In Hinduism, what is God and how do we know how God is? According to the Hindu American Foundation, many Hindus understand God to be Brahman or the infinite. Brahman is believed to be ever present, all powerful, and beyond comprehension. So there is only one God, and he is Brahman. He is the principle of everything. Everything comes from him. And being that he is ever present, all powerful, and beyond comprehension. Some Hindus believe that Brahman is formless. That means he isn't anything in particular, but becomes all things. He himself is without attributes, but manifests himself in the different forms. Other Hindus believe Brahman has a transcendent form and attributes. Okay, so other Hindus believe that, okay, you can say something about Brahman. The first one said you can't say anything about him because he doesn't have any form. He's just the source of everything. But the others say, well, he already has a form. We can say something about him. This supreme and transcendent form is Vishnu. Okay, so the very first one, the origin of everything, is Vishnu or Krishna for the Vaishnavas and Shiva for the Shaivas. The world is also seen as a manifestation of Brahman and regarded in some traditions as the body of God. Okay, so God is this formless thing, but then he creates a body, he becomes a body, and that is the world. Hindu understanding of God ranges from, sorry, you have to add an S there, non-dualistic, the universe and the absolute are not two, and it goes all the way to qualified non-dualism, that the universe is different from but dependent on God and inseparable from God too. Okay, so you see that Hinduism goes through different types of interpretations. And you have a dualistic interpretation that the universe is both dependent and different from God. Why does this happen? As we said when we were studying it in the first part of this subject, Hinduism is not actually an entire system. It's not a systematic religion that came from one source. The source of Hinduism was all the various groups that were there in the Indus Valley at the beginning of Hinduism. These understandings also range from philosophies of pantheism. Sorry, you have to add an F there, it disappeared. Of pantheism. So because there's different interpretations, you can interpret the God of the Hindus as pantheistic, everything is him. Or you can interpret him as panentheistic, that is, all of the existence is within the absolute. He's one, but everything that happens, the world, is in him. Or theist, that the absolute is external to all existence, like what they have in Christianity. God is outside the world, but the world was made through him, and the world cannot exist without him. Hindu traditions emphasize that God is the cause of existence and God pervades everything. That is Brahman. At the same time, God is beyond and not limited by the world. So you can see all these attributes given to God in Hinduism. Brahman is an abstract concept, but is believed to become accessible in murtis. Okay? He is abstract, but if you want to contact him, then you use the murti. The word murti is typically translated into English as image or idol, but these definitions are limited. Okay, that's just a little detail that would make you understand how they connect with Brahman. To Hindus, a murti is a powerful visual tool used for contemplating the nature of as well as communicating with God. Okay? It is also believed to be charged with the presence of God. Thus, Hindus may offer their prayers and devotion to a murti. Okay? So the God is actually there. It's quite different from Catholicism, because in Catholicism, the saint or God is not there, except when it is the Eucharist. In the Eucharist, God is there, according to the Catholics. While Hindus understand God to be present in a murti, they do not consider God to be limited to the murti. He is not confined in that place. Thus, the term embodiment would be more apt. Like a murti is an embodiment of God. God is understood as both immanent and transcendent with respect to the murti, which happens in everything in Brahman actually, because he becomes all things, so he is embodied in those things. And at the same time, he transcends all things because he's not that that limited thing. So God in Hinduism is understood as beyond gender, although capable of taking both masculine and feminine qualities and forms. Okay, so God itself, or we can say Brahman, is abstracts neither male nor female. But since he becomes everything else, then he could take, he is in those masculine and feminine forms. For example, as we see here, Brahma, he becomes Brahma, the creator. He becomes Vishnu, the preserver, Shiva, the destroyer, Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, and Parvati, the goddess of strength. Other forms of God include Ganesh, the remover of obstacles, and Hanuman, the embodiment of strength and perfect devotion. It is very interesting to note that the gods in Hinduism are actually incarnations of virtues, in the same way that in the Greek and the Roman religions, they are incarnations of natural powers. In Hinduism, they seem to be the incarnation of virtues, things that are found in man, that are good things that are found in man, but then they become a person, a personalized embodiment of the virtues that we strive for. So, what is the essence of God? It is interesting to note that in contrast to the Greek and Roman religions, the Hindu gods, that's what I was saying earlier, represent abstract ideals, or ideals rather than the object or forces of nature. The Hindu gods look like incarnations of the virtues, a similarity with Socratic thought that would be very pleasing to Socrates and Plato. Why? Because Plato and Socrates believed in the eternal ideas, and the eternal ideas are what represent all the things, the universally and perfectly all the things that are found in this world. Let's go to Buddhism. Well, what about Buddhism? Is there a Buddhist God? In general, we can say that God is not centrally important to Buddhism as to Hinduism. So Buddhism does not focus on the question about God, whether there is a God or if we should relate to that God. This is because it is the way out of the cycle of reincarnation, and the way out of it is more significant than man's relationship with God. So what does Buddha teaching? We wanted to escape from suffering. And that was it. The focus was that, to escape from suffering and to enter into a state of peace and joy. So it is not a relationship that we're seeking, but to enter into a state of peace and joy. Nevertheless, we know that in Buddhist tradition, it was Brahma who told Buddha to go and preach the way that he found to other men. Okay? So this is what happened, right? So why is it that way? Now that was because Buddha was Hindu before he put up his own religion, quote unquote, the way by which one could gain nirvana. Aside from that, however, Brahma did not have any other essential role in the Buddhist thought, so he doesn't appear again. And, they hardly talk about him. Brahma seems to be a device by which Buddha could refer to the highest. So he used him so that he could refer to that highest being that would give you that peace. Okay, let's move to Judaism. In contrast with the pantheist or panentheist type of God or divinity found in Hinduism, shared with Buddhism, Judaism believes in a personal and transcendent God. So what do we mean by personal? We mean he has intellect and will, and he is someone, okay? When it comes to Brahma, we're not sure if he is someone, but he is the principle of everything. And aside from that, in Judaism, God is transcendent. He is not his creation. He is not the world, so he transcends the world. Personal means that he has an intellect and will, so this slide explains it. In fact, all other types of intellect and will are mere participations of the perfect intellect and will that God has. As a personal God, he can communicate with other creatures who also have intellect and will through language. Okay? So anyone who has, or anything who has intellect and will can communicate. His intelligent creatures can dialogue with him. And, well, in Judaism, God created two types of intelligent creatures. You have the angels and you have human beings. Both of them are persons, both types are persons, both having intellect and will. So they can dialogue with God. And thus they enter into a personal relationship with him. It's not the same as in Judaism or Hinduism and Buddhism, where there is no dialogue like this. You can say that Buddha talked to Brahma, but it's like a story, right? It's a story and it's not the main metaphysical thing. Transcendent means that he is not his creatures, although it remains true that his creatures cannot maintain themselves in being without him. They need God in order to exist. But his creatures, those things are not him. Although some famous Jewish philosophers used non-faith-based starting points for their arriving at the attributes of God, the Jewish nation as a whole mainly depended on sacred scripture to know the attributes of God. Okay, the Jewish philosophers did not go and say, well, if you use philosophy, then you will know that he is all-powerful, or that he's intelligent, or that he is free. Most of them just went to the Bible and saw, well, this is a free God and he is an intelligent God, etc. So they were very happy with that already. Now, let's go to Catholic Christian philosophy. God's essence. The Catholic faith is one which most systematically uses non-faith-based sources, aside from the faith-based sources, in order to deepen their understanding of the teaching of their religion. Okay, what does that mean? A good portion, and not only those who, you don't divide them again between those who use only the revelation and those who use only philosophy. The ones who use revelation also use philosophy, and they know how to use philosophy without using revelation. So it's like looking at it from 2 points of view. And when you look at it from 2 points of view, you get a fuller meaning of it. You get a deeper understanding of what the reality is. So you don't look at it only from the point of view of faith, you also look at it from the point of view of philosophy. That is what happens in the Catholic faith. So you can know the essence of God through revelation. You can look at the Bible, and the Bible will tell you who God is. But at the same time, Catholicism picked up what Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle did. And they said, this also talks to you about God. Thus, in the Catholic faith, we find institutionally accepted philosophical analyses of the attributes of God and an explanation of how this is possible in spite of his being transcendent and invisible to the senses. So you have a philosophical explanation of who God is. For this reason, if you look at the people who become priests and they enter the seminary, they have to study philosophy first before going into theology, because this is the system that has been followed by the Catholic faith. For the Catholics, God's attributes are the same as the ones found in Judaism. Okay, so in terms of characteristics, same as Judaism, and more, because the revelation of the New Testament, which the Jews don't use, has provided fresh information about this. So they have gone deeper because they also use the Gospels, or they look at it differently. Okay? can argue with the Jews whether it's deeper or not. Thus, like the Jews, the God of the Catholics is personal and transcendent. Same God, actually. But in the Catholic faith, God comes close. It's not far. He incarnates as a human being, and then he reveals that within the one God, there are three distinct persons. Okay, now this is a revelation. You can't get that from philosophy, but that's what the Catholics believe in, and they used philosophy in order to explain how that happens. The proofs of the existence of God already tell us something about God, the attributes of God. Who, how, and what he is. We have studied in the previous meeting the proofs of the existence of God. Now, if you follow the proof of the existence of God all the way to the end, you will find out that it says something about the essence of God. It does not only say that God exists, but it also tells you something about the essence of God. And what do we find there? We were talking about 5 cosmological proofs of the existence of God. And each one of them tells you something about God. The first one tells you that God is omnipresent. Okay, prime mover. He moves everything. That's why he's omnipresent. He's there. Because everything that moves, he is there. First cause, that he is the creator. He made all those things. That's why because he is the cause of all these things. Necessary being the third proof tells you that he is simple. Necessary means he could not change. And in philosophy, in order to change, you have to be made up of at least 2 things, 2 elements. But God is only 1 element. He is just being. Degrees of perfection, the 4th proof. This tells us that God is the most perfect being. So that is the 4th attribute of God that we can get from the proofs of the existence of God. And the last one, finality, makes you see that God is a supreme lawmaker. He determines things for his creatures. Aside from that, you find other things that from other proofs, like Peter Kreeft had a proof from Bach. He said that if you listen to the music of Bach, then you will realize that God exists. And this is by beauty. It's called the Via Pulchritudinis, the way of beauty. When you experience beauty, you discover God. Proof of this, so that tells you that God is beautiful. Okay, he's beauty himself. Proof of desire, as we studied in the previous lesson, this means that God is good in himself. He's good. From the proof from conscience, again, he is, because he makes moral laws, he is supreme lawmaker for his spiritual creatures, not only for the non-spiritual creatures. And proof from religion, that there is religion, there must be a God, that he is a person with intellect and will, because religion is what is a communication of man with God. But in order for there to be communication, as we said, God has to have intellect and will. So you see, your proofs of the existence of God have told you something about the essence of God. There's a concept about participation. This is from Plato. That guy over there is Plato. Okay, and he says your participation. So the same form, you can find it in different levels. Just look at this. These are, I don't know if you're familiar with the myth of the cave. If you're not familiar with it, please Google it, find it, find out the story that Plato made about this myth of the cave. So what do we have here? We have a fire that's hitting some objects held by some persons here, and they cast shadows on the wall of the cave. Now you have the shadows that take the same shape as the cutouts that are being held. That's what is seen by the prisoners. The priest, according to Plato, when we are in this world, we only see shadows. But then we go a little bit farther and we will see the cutouts. But those cutouts represent things in the real world outside the cave. Okay? So there's a participation between the shadow, the cutouts, and the real thing that is outside the world, right? The real cat, the real table, the real chair. This is participation. All of them participate in the same form, even though they're not the same thing, right? So from that point of view, you have 3 types of terms: the univocal terms, the equivocal terms, and the analogical terms. The univocal term always means the same thing. It has the same referent. It points you to the same thing. The usual example is rabbit. I don't know if I told you this before. I think I did. Okay, so um, rabbit. When you talk about rabbit, you're always thinking about the animal. You're not thinking about any other thing. Okay. Now you have equivocal terms that use the same term for completely different realities. For example, if you have the word pen, the word pen means the writing implement that you use, or the pig pen where you put the pig, right? That's a pig pen. But they're very different. The writing implement pen is very different from the pig pen. Okay? If you want to find Bahasa Indonesia example, you have bisa, which means can. You can do this, bisa. And bisa also means poison in Bahasa Indonesia. So this is an equivocal term, bisa. Now, you have analogical terms, which refer to things that are different but share some deep sameness. What's an analogical term? Like good. I mean, you have a ball pen that is good because it works well, but you also have ice cream that is good because it tastes good, right? And the goodness of ice cream is very different to the goodness of a ball pen. Okay? And then your own goodness. So if you find a good person, um, that good person is much better than good ice cream, right? But both of them are good. Okay, so you have a good pen, good ice cream, and good person. And then you go all the way to God and you can say, well, he is really, really very good. Okay, that is an analogical term. The same term, good, you use for so many things, from the lowest up to the highest. That is an analogical term. We cannot use earthly terms univocally with God. Okay? So we can't say rabbit for God. It's univocal. Okay, you can't use it. But we can use earthly terms analogically with God. So terms that are analogical, if they are good and perfect, we can use them for God. Okay? But then we have to say that God possesses the meaning of these terms in the fullness. So when we say God is good, well, he is the best. There's nothing else better than God himself. So what happens when you have participation and analogy? You can use the triple way. So what basically we're saying in this lesson is that you can use this way in order to go all the way to God and understand who he is and what he is and what his essence is. How can we get to know something about the essence of God? You have the via affirmativa. You get one of these concepts, these analogical concepts, and you say, this can be used for God. Good, just, beautiful, great, for example. But you have to use the via negativa, which says, okay, for example, ice cream is good, but the goodness of ice cream, you cannot use it for God. It's a different goodness. It's way beyond the goodness of ice cream. Or man is good, but God is much better than a human being. Okay? We can understand the goodness of a human being, but the goodness of God is way beyond what we can understand. So when you say way beyond, you have to get that affirmative thing, say that the concept that we know here is different, and we go eminentissima. We say that we have to make it so big that it could be applicable to God. So goodness has to be so big, infinite, that it could be applicable to God. Or justice should be so big that it could be applicable to God, infinite. Or beauty should be so big and so full and so perfect that it could be applicable to God. So you make it eminentissima. We can say, when via negativa we say what God is not. This can also be the second step, as we were saying earlier, in the process of knowing something about the essence of God. In the via affirmativa, identify a quality that is open to infinity of perfection, a good quality, okay? A good analogical term. Say that our present knowledge of this quality cannot be as it is in God, and the key is to make it superlative and eminent. Okay, so via eminentissima is God possesses these perfections, you should add an S there, in their fullness. This mind, the human mind, is able to do this. So there are some philosophers who understand that the human mind can do this. This reasoning presumes that the human mind has the natural ability to reach what is infinite. It cannot see what is infinite, but it could understand that it is there and that it exists. So, what are the divine attributes that we can get in this way by using this process? God is simple, God is the supreme good, God is infinite, God is immutable, God is one, and that's it. So, I think we should stop here for this video, and we shall continue later in the second part, in which we will try to speak about how Islam looks at the attributes of God. Have a nice day, and I hope that you have learned something from the first half of this video.